This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And as always, I'm joined by Eric Hersey, who has a color wheel related announcement. What is this about?
Well, I sent you over the news today, and right afterwards, there's breaking news on the internet that we get to meet multiple colored Yoshis at the Fan Fest this year. And that's kind of breaking news. Not just normal green. I think he was there last year, if I'm not mistaken. It's not the first time you've ever met Yoshi, but we have pink and blue Yoshis, which I don't think they have different names. Jim, do you know the Super Mario lore? Do the Yoshis have different names? Or is this a question I should ask my son Hunter? He probably knows.
Yes, I think we need to get Hunter in here. I apologize that in fact, what was interesting is I have seen the most recent ad for Super Mario Brothers Galaxy movie, and Yoshi features in that prominently. And I am trying to remember that when I stood in Super Nintendo World at Epic Universe back in November, I know the Yoshi ride was working. I just didn't flash on the Yoshis being different colors.
Well, I think they are different colors because you have to collect the different eggs, and I'm guessing the different egg colors that was like the whole mini game in there that you can play or not play, and then it's over before you know it. But I think we know that there's a whole bunch of different Yoshis, but I guess that's going to be fun as a meet and greet out in FanFest in Hollywood. So that's coming up, and that is kind of the news that they have for the Mario portion of the event.
Okay. Speaking of news, a bit of news broke today. We've talked previously on this podcast about Mummy 4. The Brendan Fraser, Rachel Weisz's coming back for a brand new Mummy movie. Did you see that we actually got a really real release date for this thing today? Well,
I didn't see the release date, but I did see in passing that Brendan Fraser did confirm that he is coming back. Did we know that already, or is that new?
No, he and Rachel, supposedly, that was the big news initially, that they had persuaded him to come back to make a Mummy 4. What's interesting about this is the release date. It is May 19th, 2028, which I know 2 years away, 2 years plus. But May 19th, Eric, that's the start of summer blockbuster season these days. So that suggests this is a very confident Universal. The fact that here's a Mummy 4 coming back, 20 years after the last one, and evidently they like the script enough that it's like, okay, let's slot that for summer blockbuster season.
No, that's exciting. I think that, the fact is we still have Mummy properties in the parks, and Brendan Fraser has kind of had a little bit of a career resurgence over the last couple of years, seemed to be beloved. So I think that will make a quality movie that I think we'll all kind of at least turn out to see and give it another shot. And if it turns out well, maybe they'll turn it into another trilogy or, another franchise. And I'm thinking that would be very, very good for Universal if they can make that happen. That seems to be the game plan for most studios these days.
And speaking of which, again, folks, we are contractually obligated each episode of the Epic Universal Podcast to mention Wicked in some way. So did you see that we actually have a date now for when it begins streaming over in Peacock?
No, what date do we have there?
We have March 20th.
Okay, so a little bit of time.
A little bit of time, but got to tell you, Eric, it's going to get interesting in the once we get on the other side of that to come up with a Wicked story each week. But we'll give it a shot.
We'll
folks.
give it a shot.
Okay. Well, we have lots of other news items to talk about this week, but before we do that, we of course have to acknowledge our sponsors, and that is Be Our Guest Vacation. And are you planning your next adventure? If so, let the experts at Be Our Guest Vacation take care of the details. As a platinum level earmarked travel agency, they provide top-tier concierge service for trips to Universal Orlando, Universal Hollywood, the Disney parks, cruises, and more. So get started today at beourguestvacations.com, and be sure to mention that was the Epic Universal podcast that sent you. So, Eric, you have been combing the interwebs, looking for things to chat about today. So, what sort of Universal news do we have?
Well, we have one that has me considering right now picking up the phone and calling Be Our Guest Vacations, because I will tell you that Mardi Gras is out, and I never thought that I really needed to go to Mardi Gras or see Mardi Gras until I start looking at all the news stories and seeing all the cool things that are going on in Orlando right now. So I'm like, oh, do we have a weekend? Can I find a way to just kind of slip down there? So lots of Mardi Gras stuff this week. So just to kind of highlight, and we can kind of talk amongst ourselves about this. It opened from on February 7th, so just a couple days ago, and it runs all the way through April 4th. And of course, we know of the nightly parade. There is more than 40 international food items, and of course the live concert. So I think Cascade opened it up not so long ago, and they have all types of music that's going on. But did you see that there is a new meet and greet character, Jim?
I am looking at the photo of, am I reading this right? Prince Gator? Is that the name of this fellow?
Yes, Prince Gator. So I guess you've gone on the parade. You've reluctantly not tried to hit people with beads and stuff. But there's a giant float at the very end called King Gator. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, it's a very impressive piece. The highlight of wow, he has a kid. I didn't know that about King Gator.
Well, he has a kid, and he's meeting at the horror makeup show entrance, and it was all of the rage on the internet. And I was like, I've never seen this guy before. And he is very shiny, looks great. He has like a nice little, of course he has beads, and then he has a nice like crown on top, and looks very friendly, and it kind of reminiscent of a kind of like an Earl the Squirrel kind of character, almost like a cute looking animal. What do you think they're doing here, Jim? Do we think we have another hit on our hands?
What's so strange about this is, you remember, you must have seen images of the mascots for the Disney water parks.
Oh yeah, they're all gators. Yeah,
there we go. So it's just, this one is I'm not going to lie, cuter and chunkier than, say, Ice Gator, and I'm blanking what the other one was.
Is it Laguna Gator or something like that?
Is that right? Laguna Gator. There we go. You got it. Typhoon Lagoon. Yep.
Yeah. No. He's a good looking gator, man, and I would venture to say that if this is a hit and they have lines and merchandise, this is a good opportunity, organic IP that they created in house, and maybe they'll sell books, of them in the future. But I'm all for it. I'm all for these type of characters. So I was excited to see them, and like I said, I'm looking for a spare weekend because I'd like to go hang out with Prince Gator myself. But there's more. There's more than just meet and greets there, Jim. There is lots of booths, and obviously this is a podcast, so we can't show those. So I'd say go on the internet. I think BioReconstruct has shown many pictures of all the creative booths. There's all types of food. It sounds like there's international cuisines, like from Puerto Rico, Jamaica, Ireland, France, Greece, Brazil, Chile. And of course, the New Orleans staples like gumbo, po' boys, and beignets. And I believe there was Chef Jens Dahlman emphasized that there is live fire cooking as a key element, which of course is, can you imagine the smells? The live cooking, I think that makes the streets real hot, and the money coming out and trading it off, because I think there's a lot of people that smell and then go buy.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And speaking of typically with these special seasonal events that Universal uses to lure folks into the parks, the tribute store, reinvents itself. So what are we doing for Mardi Gras this year?
Well, I mean, I think the tribute store is really my favorite part of all things that they do. I love the tribute store. So I did watch a little video on Universal's YouTube channel. It may be 2 minutes long, and it does very atmospheric. It's called Tauntaun's Roadhouse, and it's it is just like Mardi Gras traditions. And since I've never been to a traditional Mardi Gras, I don't necessarily understand it as much, but the video does a really good job slow panning and showcasing the different elements. Highly themed, looks kind of like roads, and overall, there are some like voodoo elements, not as crazy as last year's. Last year's, I really wish I was down there for it because it was kind of like Bigfoot inspired almost, like it was like creatures. But this one is very nice, and I love a tribute store. So once again, man, I really, really want to go down there.
Okay. And of course, you have to face it. In order to make this trip happen, you have to convince Lauren. Any opportunities in the calendar that you think he could bend, use as an incentive?
Yeah, because I mean, I noticed that on the 21st, so that's next weekend. That's a tight squeeze if I could make it happen. But the Joey Fatone and AJ McLean, so it's the NSYNC and Backstreet Boy concert going on, and we saw Joey Fatone and friends over at Epcot a couple years ago, and she went to all 3 showings during the time. So I'm like, I think we can make that happen. So if I can find it, I don't think it would be hard to convince. And I find myself at Mardi Gras, and we could talk about that. So everybody wish me luck. Let's see how I can pull this off.
All right. Okay. So now we remain in Florida, talking about a significant change coming to Volcano Bay, right?
Yeah, they're going cashless, and it's not just because the weather is so cold that there's nobody in the actual water park. It's actually they kind of made an announcement that they're going cashless beginning February 25th. So I believe that means literally no dollars, no coins. We are using cards. And Jim, have you been in any theme parks where they've completely gone cashless recently?
I remember at the height of COVID, the whole notion of trying to make as few hands-on cash transactions. No, to be honest, it has been a while. Have you?
Well, that's a funny thing is because when I saw this story, it jarred back and I said, man, I feel like someone has been cashless before. And truth be told, we were at Hershey Park not so long ago, and Hershey Park was the first that I remember going cashless, but they're not the only ones. And I remember this because going cashless, like most people aren't reading going online and finding out, this ahead of time. So you go there and you're a cash person, you have a ton of cash. What are you going to do? Well, they have these kiosks in which you just transfer out and you get yourself prepaid cards. So it's not 100% like you're stranded if you don't have a credit card or you don't use credit cards or debit cards. You're not going to be able to do anything. But they have these machines, and I just remember it being the first time we had that at Hershey. But I did look up online to see that there are other parks. It was surprising to see that Six Flags Parks and SeaWorld has primarily transitioned over to cashless systems throughout.
Really?
And I see this kind of being a trend. This isn't the only place. It's funny to see that I saw SoFi Stadium and Mercedes-Benz Stadium are also completely cashless. And more fun, Sweden is considered the world's most cashless country. So they don't accept too many cash at all in Sweden. So I found myself in a nice little rabbit hole of finding out who the heck doesn't take cash. Jim, I'm curious because I think we've talked about in the past, when we talk about DAS Pass and stuff going completely digital and the map's gone, and you might not have been so keen. Are you into the cashless? Are you a debit card, credit card guy? Or are you still carrying around cash? Do we need security guards after this if you're walking around?
To be honest, the only cash transactions I regularly do these days are lottery tickets. And again, I will buy myself a Powerball. But that's my one indulgence, but I only buy one, and and that's the thing. It's only $2, and it's like, it's more to the point, if I don't have it in cash, I don't buy it. It's just, but at the same time, it's just sort of the notion of everything else. is plastic or touch, but yeah, I'm weirdly old school about lottery tickets because I feel like, if I'm going to ball up $2 and throw them into the street, which is basically what you're doing when you're buying a Powerball ticket, I feel like I have to have them physically to surrender.
So you won't be upset with Volcano Bay and the fact that it's going completely cashless. So that's good.
No.
That's good. But yeah, that was the big story. But there's other things that happened this week. Jim, did you? I listened to the fine tuning, so I know you guys necessarily weren't watching the Super Bowl. I think he was watching it for business reasons. Or did you end up watching?
Well, I actually, I watched a chunk of it while sitting on the floor next to Nancy. I was literally rolling the cookie dough into little balls to bake it to send to Alice the following day, and saw a number of the commercials while I was doing that, including the Universal one, which. Did you get to see the one for the show?
Yeah. I mean, they released it on, I think, maybe Twitter or YouTube a couple hours earlier, so I already watched it. So when it came on, I knew it. And of course, I'm screaming to Lauren. I'm like, hey, watch this one. I want your opinion. She's very critical of anything television because of her background. But I think this one passed the test. Jim, you want to give an overview of what this commercial was, if anybody missed it?
Well, it actually kind of an intriguing bend on the story. We at first see an older brother and a younger brother at home, and the older brother is better at sports, and and teases his little bro. But the interesting thing is when the family gets down to Universal, the playing field is suddenly leveled. That the older brother, for example, I'm not going to lie, that when he was looking at Stardust Racers and having the reaction, he was like, I had the same reaction. It's like, are you kidding me? And all of the faces the older brother was making on Stardust Racers are entirely appropriate, folks. Yeah. All right. I still have internal organs that haven't settled back into their original position from having ridden that thing. But it was a little brother who, during their family vacation at the Universal Orlando Resort, the playing field was, he was that much fiercer and better at the games and that sort of thing. And, and I want to say at the end of the ad, he teases his older brother, like, it's okay, little bro.
Yeah, that was a great line. Great line. And then the final line is that this changes everything, which is kind of a broader appeal, right? They're essentially saying, hey, it's not you don't just come here one day, when you have a vacation, at another theme park here in Orlando. This is a multi-day resort experience that families are wanting to seek out, especially those that are adventurous. I thought it was a great commercial and well worth the money they spent, in a sense, to get enough people knowing that, hey, there is this new theme park out here.
Yeah, no. It was a really sharp, smart ad, and in fact, what's interesting is that, remember, when they initially launched this campaign, we got to see sort of a super cut of the various different ads, and they did have the two brothers in this thing. So that suggests that there's 3 other ads out there from this series that we'll get to see. So
keep up the good work, Universal. Yeah, I mean, I love a good ad, and you keep pushing, because I think more people need to know, and let's keep breaking those records. But did you see any other ads, Jim, that caught your eye?
I have to admit, I did enjoy the Xfinity ad, the one set at Jurassic Park, and the whole notion of if they'd had the right tech, this wouldn't have happened. I kept waiting for Wayne Knight to show up in this ad, at some point, but yeah, they had Sam Neill back. They had Laura Dern. They had Jeff Goldblum. They even had. I wonder if they actually did bring back Samuel L. Jackson, because that's
a tough one. I don't know if he was advertised in terms of, or if that was just the old footage that they used. Yep. But yeah, good ad. And there were a couple others that we talked earlier about, Yoshi and Mario. Did you see the Super Mario ad?
I did. And again, again, kind of leaning into that Jurassic Park moment with the
Right.
T-Rex.
Yeah, it was a quick one. I think it was a 15-second one, and that's what that movie's coming out April, which I don't know if you need to do too much advertising. I think the Mario fans are going to come out and see that. But I saw my first Spielberg ad. Did you see that? I think it was before the game, maybe right in the beginning, because I didn't catch it at first.
Yeah, Disclosure Day. This is Spielberg returning to his Close Encounters E.T. turf. The interesting thing is there was a full-on teaser trailer, I want to say, 3 months ago, 4 months ago. I mean, there was some new footage in this thing. There particularly is what looks like an amazing scene involving a car basically driving into the side of a speeding train. This looks exciting, and this looks like a return to, the government is hiding stuff from us, the land from the original Close Encounters. So, very much looking forward to when this arrives in theaters come June.
Yeah, and then I had two more, the Minions and Monsters. Now, this was a real quick 15 seconds. You didn't get much out of it, but I ended up watching the 2-minute trailer on YouTube. Have you and Drew or anybody kind of talked about what this movie is? It's an interesting premise, and after watching it, I was, all right, I can dig this.
It's interesting you bring that up because, again, the literally what they did for the Super Bowl is they had a minion running toward the screen and then he yells monsters and then just falls over, and then you watch the full trailer now. And what I found intriguing about that is I began to then look for the trailer, and it took me hours to find it. Were you able to find it quickly? I
found it this morning. I watched it during the game, but I was kind of intrigued with the other commercials that were happening, so I was like, I'll watch it this morning. I did find it okay. But they didn't have their SEO in place.
I guess so. It's an intriguing premise. The notion of, the Minions seem to be out in Hollywood prior to their life with Gru, and they're trying to sell a director in Hollywood on the idea of making a kaiju movie, but it's just like but the director's like, well, where are you going to get a monster? And it's like the Minions being the Minions, they don't make a monster, they summon one.
Right.
And it looks intriguing. I've learned the hard way never to bet against the Minions or Despicable Me. Again, that franchise just makes money hand over fist. And if people will turn out for the Minions. But this one, lots of monsters. You get to see lots of monsters in the 2-minute long thing. And if you're a fan of the Lovecraft stories, it's like these are the cute and cuddly, old ones, that are eventually going to kill us all. So,
right.
Interesting bend.
Yeah, and the last one, Jim, is Universal adjacent, especially with the upcoming news, is the Pokemon commercials. That was one that was that had featured Lady Gaga, Trevor Noah, and a couple other celebrities, but they were going around asking who their favorite Pokemon was. I think it was that you didn't find it was a Pokemon commercial until like halfway through, where they're just naming features of what they love about people, and you think it's their significant other. Clever, good use of Pokemon. Interesting that they had a Super Bowl ad, but I of course needed to know after watching this, knowing that we do a show. Jim, what is your favorite Pokemon? And I know you have a deep history with Pokemon.
I do. I had to study them when my daughter lived in Hawaii and I was living back in New England. Trying to find a way to communicate with a toddler, who's collecting Pokemon cards, and studied the Pokemon then like it was the periodic table. And I have to say, at this point in my life, I'm a Snorlax fan. Just the notion of the big heavy guy who gets a nap a lot. It's like, there we go. Somewhere between him and Humphrey the Bear is my spirit animal.
Yeah.
So.
Well, maybe one, and we know you can meet Humphrey the Bear now in Disneyland. Maybe if they get this land going, you'll be able to meet the good old Snorlax at one day. But no, I had to ask Jim who your Pokemon was, and great answer.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, folks, that's our Universal related news for this week. And when we get back from this break, we're going to actually take a look at a Universal franchise that has 14 different installments, if you can believe it. But before we do that, there's this.
Tomorrow.
I love him. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same.
Experience the greatest love story of all time.
Why did you leave me?
Why did you betray your own heart?
A film by Emerald Fennell.
Heathcliff.
Kathy.
Margot Robbie, Jacob Elordi.
Kiss me and let us both be damned.
Wuthering Heights. Original songs by Charlie XCX. Only in theaters tomorrow. Experience it in IMAX. Rated R. Under 17. Not admitted without parent.
This episode is brought to you by Workday. Could AI help you do more of what you love? Like reaching bigger goals ahead of schedule, growing careers, and the bottom line. Workday is the next-gen ERP powered by AI that actually knows your business, anticipating your toughest challenges and how to better solve them. Connecting more dots in your organization so your people have more time to connect to what they love. It's a new Workday.
And we're back, folks. Okay. This week, we got a note from Alan Cook. You saw this come through, right, Eric?
Yeah, I did. It was an interesting note, indeed. Well, what did you have from this note?
Well, I want to read a little bit of it here. So he says, first of all, hi, Eric, Lauren, and Jim. I'm a longtime listener to the various shows in the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, and I was listening to Lauren and Eric's recent Diz and Hers item. And again, we're back to talking about Humphrey the Bear and rare character sightings at the parks. And when I was reading this, Eric, it made me think, again, folks, I'm constantly chasing down stuff that we can use here on the show to do Universal related stories. And I just bought off of eBay. This is a newspaper supplement from the Los Angeles Times, which is celebrating the 25th anniversary of Universal Studios Hollywood as a tourist attraction. So you remember, that actually opens out in Southern California, July of 1964. So this is a newspaper supplement from the summer of 1989. And the reason I bring this up, because again, Alan talks about rare characters seen in the park, is on the back of the supplement, Eric, is, there's this supposedly giant 20th anniversary cake. And it's what's interesting about this 20th anniversary cake is all of the walk around characters in the park are supposedly standing on it. So, if you look at the thing, there's Frankenstein's monsters, there's Woody Woodpecker. This is back when Universal used to pay to have Laurel and Hardy in the park, but there's also Feifel Mouskowitz from The American Tale. And I'm looking at this thing and it's like, who are those two? There are two characters on this thing that I just can't identify. And I keep, increasing the size of the photo. And it's like, finally I realize, that's Littlefoot and Sarah from the Land Before Time. And it's like, are you kidding me? They had Land Before Time walk around characters in the park. And, but again, when I look cold-bloodedly at it, well, the timing works out. I mean, The Land Before Time, the first film in this franchise, that arrived in theaters some 8 months earlier, November of 1988. It was released to theaters by Universal Pictures and made $84 million, which was a really strong gross back in the 80s for an animated film. And if you have small children, that on the heels of that film, Universal would then go on to make 13 direct-to-video sequels, with the last one, The Journey of the Brave. In fact, Eric, it was released 10 years ago this month.
Oh, wow.
February 2nd.
All the way to 2016?
2016.
They were making them that long. That's a long franchise.
That is a long franchise. And there's kind of a weird story as to how this film franchise came to be. And we have to start our story back in July of 1982, and this is when The Secret of NIMH is released to theaters. Now, mind you, that goes out. It's released to theaters by MGM, but this is Don Bluth's first movie after he left Disney in 1979 and went off and set up his own animation company. And now, mind you, MGM put up $7 million to make this thing, and unfortunately, Secret of NIMH only during the summer of '82 makes $14 million. Which, again, we've talked about Hollywood math on this show before, folks, that you basically need to make 3 times your production costs before you start to turn a profit. So this was a disappointing result. Now, to be fair here, the summer of 1982 was just a flat-out brutal time to put a family film out into theaters because the competition was insane, Eric. You had E.T. the Extraterrestrial.
Well, there's all your money right there. That's where all the money
No,
went.
that's it. In fact, that's the irony. That's Universal,
right.
Okay? But at the same time, over at Paramount, you have Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Over at Disney, you have Tron, the original Tron. I mean, there was just too much competition. And so Bluth had, assuming that Secret of NIMH was going to do some business and already planning follow-ups. He had announced, for example, that their next film was going to be East of the Sun, West of the Moon, based on the classic children's story. And behind that, Eric, if you can believe it, Beauty and the Beast. Seriously, he would have had an animated version of Beauty and the Beast out there before the Disney version in '91.
Wow.
But anyway, at this point, MGM's like, yeah, I don't think we want to fund your second movie, and good luck to you, Don. And so it's kind of a disappointing time until, one day Don's in the office and secretary comes in and said, Steven Spielberg on line 1. And it's like, okay. Don picks up the phone and Steven proceeds to say, I just saw The Secret of NIMH, and what an amazing movie. And, I haven't seen effects like that since Pinocchio. And you guys did a masterful job. And the call ends the way everybody in Hollywood wants a phone call with Steven Spielberg to end. It's like, we should do something together, and sure enough, Don has a meeting with Steven Spielberg. But, initially the idea, Steven sort of lays it out to Don. It's like, I was thinking to do a movie about my grandfather, Phil Posner. And it's like, okay. And, Phil, back when he was a kid in the 1880s, his name was Feifel. And he and his family were in Odessa, which is in the Ukraine, and they fled from the Cossacks and came to America. And I was thinking, we should do that as an animated film. And Don's kind of blinking at him like, okay, how do we do that? And it's but I was thinking, what if we told it from like the mice that were on the boat that came over, and they're Russian mice, the mice from the Ukraine that are also trying to get away from the Cossacks, and Don's like, okay, all right, that I can work with, and that's how we wind up with American Tail, which arrives in theaters November of 1986, $9 million budget, but that one goes on to have an $84 million gross.
Oh, so the Hollywood math checks out there. The Hollywood math is very good. And that was I remember that being a very, very big hit and, a movie that I watched many times in my youth. And it frustrates me because I wanted to watch it actually less than maybe a couple months ago. I'm like, hey, I think I heard a song that was similar too. And I'm like, I'd like to watch that movie. And you can't find it on any streaming service right now. You got to buy it on Apple or Amazon. And I'm like, I'm paying already. But no, I'm going to, after this, I'll probably end up forking out some money and go and watch it.
Well, what's kind of interesting about it is this gives now Spielberg a taste for animation, and he likes it. So, he's, turns to Bluth and says, hey, you want to do another one? And, and it's like, Yes, please. But this time Spielberg brings in George Lucas as his co-executive producer. And so Don, it's one of these things where it's like, I'm working with Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, Disney.
Right. Like that gamble really paid off, him leaving,
Yeah, but here's the thing. It's not Don calling the shots. Again, remember, Don had plans to do East of the Sun, West of the Moon, Beauty and the Beast, but again, it's Spielberg's money, and now it's George Lucas's money, and the two of them come through the door and said, how would you like to do dinosaurs? And in fact, here's a story we're thinking. We're thinking about baby dinosaurs that have to make their way to a magical green valley. What could you do with that? And Don's like, I guess I could do something with that. And, Don's sitting there, this is even less of a story than, Feifel Posner, gets on the boat from Odessa. In fact, at some point, Don turns to Stephen and says, I would really, in order to start storyboarding this thing, I kind of need a script. And this is what Spielberg says. Well, look, all right, we're working on the script, but I tell you what, go off and animate baby dinosaurs, hatching out of eggs, because we know definitely that'll be part of this movie. So that they go off and they're animating the movie without a script for a while. But at the same time, Don, remember, started at Disney. And, the whole notion is I want my dinosaurs in this film, which is now being called Land Before Time, to be just as good, if not better, than the ones people saw in Fantasia in that the Rite of Spring section of the movie. So the T-Rex sharp tooth in this thing is complete nightmare fuel. And now that's where it gets kind of interesting, because it's now in early 88, and this film is supposed to come out in November of that year. And Spielberg is, at the same time working on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, with Robert Zemeckis, will be coming out in June of 88. And so they have to do a lot of the test screenings and recording and that sort of thing over in London. And by the way, Bluth has now set up his animation studio over in Ireland anyway. So, Don's making regular trips over to London to meet with Spielberg. And Spielberg's looking at this and it's like, ooh, these dinosaurs are scary. And it's like, well, yeah, they're dinosaurs. And more to the point, the villain of the film is a T-Rex chasing baby dinosaurs. It's like, yeah, I think this is maybe too scary. And we're going to have to make some cuts. And 19 different scenes get pulled out of this movie, Eric. A total of 10 minutes of run time. In fact, what's fascinating now is that because they had already cut the trailers and that sort of thing, what's really interesting about Land Before Time, the first film, is you can watch the trailers for this thing and see scenes that didn't make it into the finished film. Also, animation collectors have individual cells from scenes that were fully animated and painted that were lopped out of the movie that have the T-Rex trying to eat the little baby dinosaurs. And, they also, because Spielberg wanted a kid-friendly dinosaur movie. Even today, when you watch the movie, there are continuity errors and the story ends in kind of a weird fashion. But, in the end, I mean, it still worked. It still succeeded with audiences. In fact, it made pretty much the exact same amount that American Tail did when it went out into theaters. It made $84 million. But, Spielberg at that point was like, okay, I'm happy we made this movie. But I don't think I want to make another one. On the other hand, I'd love to make another American Tail movie. Again, that's Fievel Goes West, and which, by the way, Dawn didn't make.
Really?
And, yes, and we will explain why in a moment. But first, this.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
We're back, and Eric, we've been talking about The Land Before Time, which, again, are going to make dinosaurs, which made me think of Dinosaur the Ride, which just closed, last week at Disney's Animal Kingdom?
Oh, yeah, with lots of people seeing it out. I think it ended up having a 265-minute wait on the last day. Crazy.
Wow, I did not see that. Holy cow. Well, I bring that up because Joe Rohde, the gentleman, who wrote Herd on Animal Kingdom, he posted some stuff. This was on Instagram. It said, I guess today is the last operating day of Dinoland USA at Disney's Animal Kingdom. And I have to say, I will miss its sly and droll sense of humor and the way it attempted to take a complicated subject like paleontology and turn it into a series of entertaining experiences. And he talked about the individual strengths of the land, but he also talked about when this park opened. Here's the thing. Animal Kingdom needed a thrill ride. So this, by default, became the thrill ride. And as Joe mentioned, Countdown to Extinction, the original name for Dinosaur the Ride, wasn't exactly calculated to appeal to the core audience for dinosaurs, which is little kids. But again, the problem was they needed a thrill ride. And so, that they had to bump up the thrill component of the attraction, to fill that need at the park. What I loved about that quote is Joe said the quiet part out loud, that, little kids are a very important, are huge dinosaur fans, and they want to be able to see things. And we were just talking about Spielberg insisting that Don Bluth make changes to, Land Before Time before it was released to theaters in November of 88. And so we had 10 minutes of footage cut out of the film. Now, what's interesting about this is that Steven Spielberg gets the opportunity. He's working with author Michael Crichton. This is the spring of 1990. It's just 2 years after Land Before Time has gone out into theaters, and Steven's made a healthy profit off of that film. And he's talking with Michael Crichton, and it's like, well, what are you working on next? Because they're working on the television series for NBC ER, the pilot of that show. And Crichton says, "Oh, I got this. I got a book coming out later this year. It's about a theme park where they use DNA to bring dinosaurs back to life." And Steven's like, "Tell me more." And eventually, Crichton realizes, "Wow, Hollywood would be interested in this." And so they actually set up. They make the book right, or the movie rights to Jurassic Park available for bidding, Eric, a full 6 months ahead of time. And what was fascinating was that every studio, with the exception of Disney, and put in a bid. I mean, for example, Warner Brothers put in a bid on Jurassic Park with the idea that their movie version of Jurassic Park would be directed by Tim Burton. On the other hand, Columbia Pictures, they wanted the rights to Jurassic Park, but they were going to have the movie directed by Richard Donner, the guy who did The Goonies and the original Superman movie. And then Fox, 20th Century Fox, that was James Cameron. And what was interesting is that in the end, it was Universal that landed the film rights. And, they got them for $2 million. And it was 1.5 for the rights to make the movie. And then they give Crichton an additional $500,000 to write the screenplay. And relatively recently, James Cameron talked about what he would have done with Jurassic Park. And, he said, look, I read the book, and for example, you remember that the gentleman, Hammond, in the book, Hammond's the villain.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's not, kindly Sir Richard Attenborough, I mean, it just, he's, if anything, he's more concerned about his park and the money he's put into it than the fact that his grandchildren are somewhere out there potentially going to get eaten.
Yeah, that makes you a villain.
Well, but that's the thing. Spielberg looked at this thing, and having just come off of Land Before Time, it's like, no. That first of all, Hammond's got to be a grandfather. These are his kids. He's got to be somewhat heroic. He's got to put his grandkids above his park. And also, Spielberg was like, this can't be so scary that kids can't go. And that was the thing. Spielberg deliberately, and this is on the heels of Land Before Time, the notion of, no, kids need to be able to see this movie and it can't be too scary. It can be thrilling, but it can't be too scary. So that's how it ends up, adjusting the film. It arrives in theaters in June of 1993, makes, I want to say, $800 million. It's a box office behemoth. And meanwhile, just before that, in November of 91, we got American Tail, Fievel Goes West. And what was interesting about this is that Spielberg went to Bluth and said, hey, I want to do a sequel to American Tail. And, I want to, have, Fievel, go out to the American West. And but here's the thing, we made that movie, the original Land Before Time, for $9 million. I need you to make this film for less than that. It's a sequel, and I don't think it'll do quite as well. So, and at this point, Don had a financial partner, Mr. Sullivan. In fact, when the studio moved over to Ireland, it was known as Sullivan Bluth Studios. And so Don said, hang on, I got to talk with my financial partner. And the financial partner said, no, the first one cost $9 million. At the very least, we should get $9 million. We can't make it for less. And that offended Spielberg. And he went off and found another company, which ironically enough, they couldn't make the American Tail sequel for $9 million. They wound up spending $16.5. But direct result of this, Bluth and Spielberg had a falling out and didn't work together ever again.
Oh, really? So none of that rockabilly or All Dogs Go to Heaven or anything? I would have thought they were all. I mean, they're all Bluth, but yeah, no, not with Spielberg.
They're all Bluth, but they are not with Steven Spielberg. Now, on the other hand, as soon as Jurassic Park comes out and makes as much money as it does, and Steven, having seen, again, not necessarily happy with the financial returns for, American Tail 2, Fievel Goes West. But on the other hand, Spielberg, is looking at the research they have for Jurassic Park, and it's like a lot of little kids went back to see Jurassic Park, a number of times. And it's like, maybe, we want to take that into consideration. And, and we did a sequel to American Tail, but we did it for theatrical. And, this is at a time when Disney is just getting into doing home premieres, like with Return of Jafar and, that sort of thing. And Spielberg's like, well, Disney's doing it. Let's do that. Let's do home premieres. So we get our first Land Before Time, The Great Valley Adventure. It hits store shelves on December of 94. Does well enough that the very next year, same time, in time for Christmas, The Land Before Time 3, The Time of the Great Giving, arrives. And Eric, the thing is that they're very disciplined about how much these things cost, and it's like, okay, this is the price point, and if we get it out on this production schedule, these things will make money. And so, Eric, they put a brand new one out on shelves for the home premiere market every year from 1994 through 2003.
That's good job stability for people. There's people drawing dinosaurs. You're good for that. That's great for an animator.
Oh God, yeah. And now, mind you, there's no new film in 2004 for some reason, but between 2005 and 2007, we get 3 films, and then we get a Land Before Time animated series for Saturday morning, and then finally, there's another 9-year gap, and we get the final film in the series, Journey of the Brave, in 2016. And I bring this last bit of news up because, well, Universal isn't necessarily in the Land Before Time business right now, but there's an individual called Joey Lever who is out there making a CG version of Land Before Time. In fact, if you Google Land Before Time CG, you can actually see the presentation film that Joey has put together. You can see some of the animation tests with the characters in CG. And Eric, I bring this up because do you remember when Ryan Reynolds spent his own money on a Deadpool test? That put that proof of concept out in 2014, and that's what got us the Deadpool movie.
Yeah, didn't it slip out there? Somebody kind of accidentally found it or something like that, or it was a big deal.
Yeah, and what's interesting is only after the fact did Ryan Reynolds admit, the person who let it slip out, that was me.
Right.
Wow. He put it out there, and that's why we have. Well, that's why I have the $1 billion earner Deadpool and Wolverine from a year or so back. So I'm going to be interested to see if, based on the reaction to this footage that Joey Levers put out there for the CG Land Before Time, whether or not, Universal circles back on this idea, and maybe we'll get some more, installments of the franchise. But in closing here, I have to ask, do any of our listeners, did they encounter the walk-around versions of Littlefoot and Sarah back in the Universal parks in the, this would have been the late 80s, early 90s? Because, Eric, I'm not going to lie, they're interesting looking walk-around suits, and you look at it and feel like, oh, the poor teenager in that thing. Holy cow.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to do my digging on YouTube and see if I can't find any of the videos, or I'm sure there's somebody out there that has something Land Before Time, because and I think if they put something out there right now, I mean, in the live action remake in the CG world, where we're all kind of recycling those early 90s, kids like me who have kids of my own, we kind of like that stuff. So I see that making some money. I could see Fievel making some money even. I could see them rebooting those in their own route. So I'll be paying attention.
Yeah, I have to say, what Joey's put out there, it's handsome looking. You look at these characters and like, wow, they would work as CG. But anyway, so that's our feature for this week, folks. And at this point, I guess we can close up shop for this week's edition of the Epic Universal Podcast. Right?
Yeah, I think so. But we would, if you guys met Littlefoot, Sarah, any of those, send us some pictures over online. We'd love to see them.
Cool. Likewise, if you have topics or suggestions for other Universal-related topics that you'd like Eric and I to talk about on future installments of the podcast, feel free to send those along through social media, and with that, I guess we're done for this week, folks. So thanks for listening to this installment of the Epic Universal Podcast, and we will be back next week.